were young, when we were teenagers, his older brother started to make the mistakes that teenagers make and get himself into trouble. And Jonathan just never did. He just always kind of found his way through situations. The opportunities were there, but he didn't really fall to one extreme or the other. He had a sense of balance, where I might have gone too deep into some religion and too far away from some religion. He had the ability to kind of keep it centered. And he really had that all through his life and in all of my dealings with him, whether it was his studies of literature and art, his liberal arts days at the University of Florida, or his medical days at South College. He always kind of knew what he wanted to do. And he had his own path. He didn't follow the traditional 4 years in and out. He had his own path that it made sense to him. I don't know if it always made sense to everybody else, but he knew where he was headed, and he stayed on that path. So the rule that I've come to adopt is when I can't seem to find my way because somehow my compass is a little more fluctuating, I just think, well, what would Jonathan do? 14,140, that's the number of days that I had Jonathan in my life. 0 is the number of days that axiom would have misguided me. Or maybe 1. There was the time that we went swimming in the Gulf of Mexico during Hurricane Opal as the waters came up. Pittman was there. And I thought about that some. Was that what would Jonathan do gone awry? Because there are hazards to that kind of an environment. Maybe it was. Maybe it was that his older brother was just going to do it, and he wasn't stopping his older brother. So I better be there, just in case. When I think of this concept of a moral compass and a judge of character and a sense of direction, I think of Jonathan had some people thrust upon him. He came home and Joel was there. There were others that he chose. He chose Renee. And when a person of great direction chooses you, that must say something about you. He also married Haley, and he married Ashley. He struggled a little bit to get the necklaces attached. It took like two or three awkward minutes in the wedding chapel. It was at least as endearing as it was awkward, if not more so. These are some life lessons that I learned from my brother. I'll show them one at a time. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. Do or do not. Jonathan didn't try to do everything. There were a lot of things he had no interest in. But if he was going to do it, he was going to go all in. If he was going to read a book, he was going to read the whole series. If he was going to study literature, he was going to get 15 degrees in literature. He played sports when he was young, but as we got older, we both kind of gravitated away from athletics and into debate and literature and things like that. He knew what he wanted to do and what he didn't. And if he didn't want to do something, you ain't getting him to do it. These are the 3 women who live with that male prototype. If we're not doing it, we won't. Just in case that compass ever got distracted, when in doubt, what would Dad do? Or what would Dad approve? Jonathan was, in the nicest way you can say this, a daddy's boy. When we lost our mother, I was 11 years old. Jonathan was 9 years old. Chrissy was 13 years old. We had a family structure. I kind of gravitated towards one part of the extended family. Chrissy kind of gravitated towards another part of the extended family. And Jonathan kind of grabbed the ankle of his father. I always remember back then, where was Jonathan? He's usually going to be with his daddy. And in those later years, when his brother would wander astray, I think sometimes he had a wild side for sure. His wild side had an envelope. It had a perimeter. It got up to the point that Dad would not approve, and that's where he hit the fence. I'd jump over that fence, and I think that trait would have served me well. Life lesson, take care of others and take care of yourself. Jonathan's life's mission was to help people be well. He helped his siblings to to grow as we dealt with the reality of losing a parent. He helped me to function as I dealt with the reality of emerging into adulthood. And I think there's a prescription that he would write for us here today, and that's two things: laugh and cry. I don't understand the neurochemistry as well as he did, but we would both agree that those two reflexes, those two responses are necessary for us. I don't even want to say heal. For us to move on. If I need help someday, if I need to cry, what I will think is Jonathan had to deal with that reality. Now this little boy will deal with the same. And this little boy has siblings. He has sisters. His sisters have him. They also have mom. They also have grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles, and that's all great. But they have an extra burden, and they have an extra resource. That's the eggs that hatch from the same nest. You're going to need those eggs. You're going to need them more than most people need them. Next prescription is to laugh. There's a yin and there's a yang. You need to cry, but you need to laugh. Monty Python made Jonathan laugh. Things that made his father laugh: Crocodile Dundee, MASH. There are plenty more. These are resources. I'm going to go back and I'm going to find one. I found one. Picture here to help me cry. This little mini-me. Jonathan was originally went by the name of Cody. He's Jonathan Cody Hall. He originally went by his middle name, like Pamela Grace Ballou. For the first, 10, I forget how many years. For the first few years of his life, he was a Cody. He later decided he liked Jonathan. I believe there was some fraction of himself that was a Jonathan and some fraction that was a Cody. And he took the minority Cody fraction and he made a mini-me. Cody 2. And Cody looks grown up to me here. He looks like a bit of a ladies' man. And so old and so bold and yet so young, so fragile. Life lessons: spend time where you care. And this really has to do with doing what you love and doing it well. He didn't try to do everything. He didn't try to play sports, but he spent time where he cared, and that was with his family and with his love of art and literature and with making people be well. I've heard stories of him passing on opportunities within his job, opportunities that involve a lot of exposure and speaking and opportunities that would have advanced his career, and he didn't necessarily care about that. What he cared about was doing what he wanted and doing what he loved, and that's where he put his focus. And he didn't pass on those opportunities because he was scared of public speaking. He was on the debate team. He and I both did that as youngsters, and that helps you to conquer your fear of public speaking. That wasn't the issue. It was just that's not where he cared to be. And if that's not where he cared to be, then there's no benefit. Life lesson: stop and smell the art. I'm sure there's a lot of technically minded people here. I'm an engineer by trade. I read trade articles, trade magazines. Jonathan had time for all of that. He made time for all of that. He was current in the literature of his day. I consulted him with medical problems of my own, what to do about my cholesterol, things like that, and he was able to bring me current literature sources from things that he read. He certainly wasn't deficient in those areas, but he made time for the arts. Stop and smell the art. Life lesson. Look before you leap. And wife help is the best help. Let people off the hook or forgive. When we were very young, we were playing a game of jump rope. And I don't mean jump rope as you typically think of it. No, we stretched a rope across the floor at a certain height, and then one would run and jump over the rope, clear it to the end, and maybe we'd try it at a little higher. Well, Jonathan came running, and his impudent brother played a Lucy trick on Charlie Brown and raised the rope. Jonathan tripped and went flying, a projectile, into the corner of a wooden stereo cabinet, splitting his head open, sending him to the emergency room. They had to put him in a little papoose so that they could stitch it up. He let me off the hook for that. If he held a grudge, I never knew it. I think it was years later that I had to go back and check my memory. Did I really? Do you remember this? Yeah, you knew this. We knew that. He didn't repress it. He just learned to let me off the hook. There's an app for that, or in Jonathan's case, there's a book for that. Several years ago now, I had a friend who was struggling with an abusive relationship and patterns of addictive relationships. And I consulted my brother through emails. I consulted with him on how to help that friend. He's a friend of mine, not a friend of his. But he went off and he did research. He brought his psychology background to bear and helped me to find books and resources that I could share with that friend to help that friend to be well. At the time, I wasn't sure that love addiction was a thing, but yeah, there's a book for that. Never stop learning. This guy had more degrees than a graduated cylinder. University of Florida, double major, English, psychology, minor in classical literature. University of Massachusetts at Amherst, a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, minor in poetry. South College in Knoxville, Masters of Health Science in Physician's Assistants Studies. I'm not here to talk about the resume. I'm here to talk about the person. But the resume shows a pattern of learning beyond the typical time horizon of going to school and getting your degree and entering the market. It was always continuous learning. He liked Dickens. He liked to read the complete works of Charles Dickens. Many, many years ago, he read every Dean Koontz novel there was. I think later in life, he developed what you would see as more sophisticated tastes. He may have lost his interest in the pedestrian Dean Koontz. He left those books behind at Dad's house in Florida. He took the more sophisticated books with him. But I say sophisticated in jest because he didn't look down on people. He wouldn't, oh, you read Dean Koontz and I read Dickens and Proust. It wasn't about that. It wasn't about status. It's just what he loved. Don't look down. I don't mean if you're on a tightrope. I mean, don't look down at people. I was rummaging through his record collection, and I took some pictures of a few records that are very recognizable to about 2% of the people. And you know who they are. You know who you are. These are records that sophisticated patrician people listen to. Not the ordinary. Not the people who listen to mainstream radio. And a lot of these people are snobby people. I never heard Jonathan talk down to a person because they were listening to different music or because they liked accessible pop music. You could listen to accessible pop music too. But he lived the way that he lived without ever trying to put himself on a pedestal. He didn't even go through a phase. Like a lot of people go through a phase where they think their music is the cool music. And then they realize that there's so much out there and then they outgrow it. But he never even went through that phase. Life lesson, take more pictures. I'm not sure if I learned this one directly from Jonathan or maybe from Jonathan's father. And I think I learned it even recently as I was pulling together the preparations for this ceremony. The pictures that you saw coming in, especially the really early ones, are now priceless. And I put Salvador Dali's The Persistence of Memory. In Jonathan's house, there's a physical model of this clock here that sits on the manteltop. And I associated it with this life lesson because photographs of each other, and the things that we do, that's the persistence of our memory. That's the thing that allows us to remember something vividly and bring it back after we've forgotten them. I'm only 41 years old and I still forgot like half of the things that my sister reminded me of as we were talking through these old stories and these old anecdotes, or at least a large fraction of them. Your siblings, those who came from the common egg, that's one persistence of memory because they remember a story that you don't, you remember a story that they don't. But don't forget to take a few pictures along the way. As I was pulling these out, I was kind of frustrated. I was like, well, I need to find a picture of Dad and Jonathan together. So I was frustrated, and then it dawned on me, wait a minute, who do you think is taking these pictures? Dad's in every one of them. Wear nice shoes. Make funny faces. And the life lesson that my little brother taught me, live the fullness of time available. He lived more life in 38 years than a lot of people live in twice that time. Part of that he did by not sleeping as much, 8 more hours. It would not be uncommon for me to go to bed before he would eat dinner. But it wasn't just that. It was also that I need my beauty sleep and he doesn't. But it was that he stayed focused. He didn't get distracted on nonsense. He stayed focused. He had the attention span to read a Dickens book or whatever it was that held his fancy. And that's whether he was living in the States or studying abroad, spending time in Europe. He lived more life in that period of time than many people live in twice that. And he's denied the privilege of living the rest of it. And that can happen to any of us. I love you, man.